everyone, welcome back to the Hawkins Do Copy podcast. My name is Lauren.
And my name is Emily, and in this podcast we talk about all things Stranger Things.
So welcome back to episode 14 now, our second week of spooky month, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Can we talk about how appropriate it was that episode 13, though, is in spooky month?
Yes. I mean, we could not have timed that any better. Like, that was completely accidental.
Unless it was on Halloween night.
Oh, that would have been good. That would have been good. So, speaking of spooky, this episode is all about horror. Horror influences.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the horror influences within the Stranger Things not extended universe.
The actual universe of Stranger Things.
The actual universe of Stranger Things. So there are many influences.
Yes.
This stuff is evident from the show Bible as well. Duffers have been very much influenced, I think, by Stephen King and, let's say, Japanese horror and all those kinds of things. So we're going to be getting into a little bit of that in today's episode.
Yeah, which is very exciting. I love horror. I am a big horror fanatic. And I have seen quite a lot of the ones that have inspired Stranger Things, which is really good. I was literally saying to Emily before this started that I did one of my A-level projects on the comparison between Eastern and Western horror. So that's why I love things like Stranger Things, and that's why I love the things that have influenced it, because there are some really good ones, and you can really see that Matt and Ross Duffer have taken that influence, and I think the show is better for having those influences in it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really liked, actually, let's just take season 3 for example. I really liked when you can pick up what they're going for. So in season 3, when they're hiding from the mind flayer human concoction that is there towards the end, when they're hiding and it crushes the walkie-talkie, and it's so Jurassic Park.
Oh my god!
Don't they
literally look in the car mirror, don't they?
Yeah,
like it's so Jurassic Park.
Like that. Yeah, that you pick up on it and you just think, I see what you've done there, and it's just that really satisfying moment. And just remember that. That's what I think is really good about the show.
Yeah, because I think what they do so well is it's not a copy, but you can tell that the influences are there, and I think they have just the right amount of having those influences compared to, say, other things that might directly copy a film or another show, whereas I think they do it so well that the influences are subtle but really add to what they're doing. And I really like that. I like that there's not always conventional horror, but the way that they do it is like the influences they take are done really well.
Definitely. So should we start with season 1 then? Work with season 1 and then go through?
Yes. So we've got season 1, 2 and 3 and the influences with them, and then the upcoming influences for season 4, which I'm very excited about. A lot of them. That's going to be very good.
There is a big mix in season 4, to say the least, and I'm already looking forward to delving into that.
Yeah,
in probably about half an hour's time.
Yeah. So season 1, what inspired season 1?
So season 1, I think, was very much rooted in the Stephen King more than anything, I think. So it was the Stephen King's, I know it's not horror, but the Stand By Me is more of that kind of, that real human, but there's something supernatural going on at the same time kind of element.
Yeah.
So Carrie is a big one. I think we can very
Firestarter.
clearly see how, I think you can really see, if we take Carrie as just a starter for it, how that is woven into the show.
Oh my god, so much. There's so much influence for Carrie in the show, and it's a really, really big one. I think. And I think if you've read Carrie or if you've seen Carrie, like, and then watch Stranger Things, you can really pick up on those parts of it. And it's similar with it as well. Like, the party dynamic is so similar to the Losers Club, and not just because Finn Wolfhard is in both, but because
convenient that really.
but because, like, you just look at their whole dynamic, and it's so, like, it's a bunch of boys and a girl that comes into it, like, you know. And I know Max comes into it in season 2, but you have that same dynamic, and, like, being at the quarry and the things happening at the quarry and all those different elements. And I think that Stephen King was definitely a huge influence for season 1.
Yeah, I think if we delve almost like a bit deeper in, I know I keep going back to Carrie, if we think about that one, that it's that idea of the growing up, and how I know that she's very much, her father isn't okay and the mother makes a deal that isn't great, but besides of that, you know, well, actually no,
but, like, really actually that's literally the same. Brenna is the only father she's ever known, and he is awful. And I guess you could argue that Terry signed up to do the trials in the lab, which were not great.
Carrie is the perfect pathway for Elle, I guess, in some sense. But you know what I mean? It's all about that growing up aspect, and I guess, in a sense, finding who you are, even if it is in a very disastrous way for Carrie. In the end, it's all about kind of like owning those powers, and you know, maybe Elle won't end up destroying and setting fire and killing all her classmates in season 4.
I would prefer that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to rule anything out here, because it is Stranger Things. And in the wise words of David Harbour, as he once said to me, is anyone ever okay?
There we go.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Thank you for those words of absolute torture. But yeah, I think, but, like, to be honest, if that happens at her school in the new undisclosed location where they're moving to, Utah,
watch us be completely wrong about this. I just really enjoy the fact that this is based off the fact that High School Musical is an influence for the season.
On this hill, but, like, watch them move to, like, South Dakota or something, and it just be
San Francisco.
But yeah, maybe she'll, because I'm interested to see her actual school dynamic when she goes to school, because who knows, like, people might treat her a bit differently, you know, like, maybe, but then she won't have her powers, so.
No, she won't. She won't have that. I mean, I'm presuming she's going to be still trying to get them. And I think it will be a case of, actually, though, by the end of season 4, I think she will have the powers back.
Season 4 finale, absolutely.
Yeah, I think she will have them back then, which, I mean, I suppose it still follows, in a sense, that trajectory. But
yeah, maybe she gets them back, and it is like a big Carrie moment where she does set fire to everything because she gets her powers back.
I mean, you never know, actually. If you think about it, she hasn't probably used them for a good while. And I'm guessing they're going to be brought back by a sense of emotion. It's not just going to be one day, oh, hi, I crushed the Coke can. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like that kind of moment again. It's going to be a big explosion of something. And I really also enjoy that it started with I enjoy it as well. There's starting discussion of season 1 influences, and already we're on to season 4.
I mean, we're very excited about season 4. Very excited. Filming is starting up again, we think, which is very exciting. Oh, I can't wait. I've been so excited for season 4. Oh my god.
Yeah. Right. Should we get back to season 1 though?
Season 1. Yeah, 4 years
I
ago.
I haven't seen or read Firestarter. So how is that an influence then?
So Firestarter is something that I read after I'd seen season 1 and season 2 of Stranger Things. So it was actually my first Stephen King. No, it wasn't. It was my first Stephen King book that wasn't from the Shining universe, because I read The Shining and Doctor Sleep, and then Firestarter was my first, like, outside of that. And basically the plot of Firestarter is it's Andy, her dad's called Andy, and he and his wife were part of MK Ultra, and took part in the experiment.
Convenient.
And they had a daughter, and the daughter has powers. But the things that she can do when she does them, because she's young, she doesn't have full control. So she'll use her powers to do something else. For example, like go to a phone box and get coins out of for like change, but she'll start a fire somewhere else because she can't control the power that she has. So he's on the run with her because the government kills his wife and her mum. So he's on the run with his daughter because he doesn't want them to get her because she's really powerful.
Well, that sounds awfully familiar.
A little bit, yeah.
Say. Yeah, down to the names and the daughter and MK Ultra. Might be a little bit of an influence then, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb there and say that Firestarter influenced Elle's character.
Yeah, it makes it interesting though the idea then of one thing to do one thing has to then affect something else.
Yeah,
which I mean, literally 12 minutes in, I'm going to bring it up. But if we think about then why Will got taken, is that technically the Firestarter scenario then?
Well, this is what, yeah, like that ties in, and it could be that, and like that they wanted to get him because, like, but then did his parents? Does his parents have powers?
No, I meant it more along the lines of, so if Elle's done all this, so he's essentially the fire that is starting somewhere else then.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I get you. Yeah.
So
could also be her bleeding.
So, all that too. That is probably the more reasonable explanation. But I also like the idea of one thing has to lead to a consequence.
Oh yeah. Like I can totally see that as well. But just before I forget that train of thought, it could be the fact that she can use her powers, but she bleeds.
Yeah, I think it definitely is probably more likely the bleeding. I think because it builds up as well, doesn't it? It starts as one thing. Yeah, exactly. And then it ends up eyes and just very, very dramatic. But
it could be the Will situation. You are right. That could definitely be a consequence of that.
Yeah, because you think about it, I suppose that every time she uses it, ultimately when she finally uses it at the end, they locate him. He then gets taken. So if you want to look at it from that aspect, it's still that fire starting somewhere else. It can't be. I suppose actually, even at the end, there she goes for him to come back.
Yeah,
and that is something that plays out throughout. So
this is actually them leaving together and Joyce taking Elle in is actually the first time that they've been properly together on a screen without the other characters being there and without there being some kind of threat to their lives. And that's going to be very interesting, because at the start of this podcast I actually had a theory, and I do just want to state for the record that I do not support J.K. Rowling in any way whatsoever, and I'm only mentioning this because at the very beginning I mentioned this as a possibility, is that Will is like a Horcrux, or like has a similar thing to the Horcrux. So then him and Elle being together is that kind of the vibe of only one can't live while the other survives, because they've never been together, not really, not properly. A little bit in season 3, but even then not massively.
Yeah, but were they together in season 3? Were they really? We don't need
like
to get
in
into
the
that
opening
again.
scene, like in the first episode, and then that's pretty much it. Yeah,
that's what I've always thought that, but it seems odd that they, I mean, even in season 3, I think they said one word to each other overall, didn't they? It was just more when they would talk about the roller coaster or something like that. I mean, it's like a roller coaster, what do you mean? no.
No.
And that was pretty much it. There was no other interaction there. So I'm very interested in that dynamic. And yeah.
I've not thought about that. I've not actually thought about the fact that they do not interact.
No. The
That
only real interaction.
That can't be accidental.
Yeah. No, you've got that one moment there, and then the only time he ever really brings her up is when he has the argument with Mike, and it's like, she's stupid. Like,
I wonder if like he thinks he can't like her. I wonder if there's still something in him that means that he's mad at her. I wonder if we're going to get season 4 and they're going to be in their new town, Utah, and they're going to hate each other. Or he's going to have a problem with her.
Yeah. We had this discussion kind of the other day, obviously off podcast. And it was the idea of, we saw a theory that was floating around Reddit. We won't go into it too much.
Oh my god, don't. I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate the concept of this theory. Maybe we'll talk about it at some point, but I'm still pretending it doesn't exist because it makes sense and I don't want it to make sense.
No. So we won't go into it completely, but there was this kind of idea that if this theory ends up being true, then technically everything is, well, I guess in the eyes of Will, Elle's fault. Mm-hmm. And I mean, arguably, I suppose if you look at it objectively, that it's not wrong. Technically, everything that has happened to Will has been on some level because of her, but this theory would make it very much, it's, you know, it really has happened, and that would have some kind of they wouldn't get along. No, and I don't know, I would, I don't want to say I want to see them not get along, but I think it'd be interesting to play that out.
It's an interesting dynamic, like absolutely an interesting dynamic. And I do wonder what they're going to be like, because I think Jonathan has spent more time with Elle than Will has, and I think Jonathan actually is quite protective of her and like tries to help her and like looks out for her. But so like I don't think he'll have a problem seeing her as a little sister. No. And Joyce loves her. Joyce will look after her and love her because that's just what Joyce is like, and she's also spent more time with Elle than Will has. Whereas Will, like, what has he been through? Elle, like this, that's going to be really interesting, and I can see that has like more of a negative impact. I really hope they don't pull the, we're going to presume they've interacted off screen. I really hope they don't pull that card, because I feel like that's what they would expect us to do with Will and Mike. They didn't do that with, they didn't do that with Alan Max though. No, they didn't actually. We had that introduction, which would have been a good few months down the line. So, because I suppose even in that last scene, let's also appreciate the fact this is meant to be a horror influences thing, and now it's purely gone into the Elle Will show. Yeah, even in that last scene, they cross past each other, don't they? So Will and Mike have their bro moment, and then he walks out, and then Mike walks into another room. Elle walks in. They're not even in the same car to the area of where they're going. He is just in tears. She has got the light surrounding her. Like, it's that is. But then possibly is that similar to like Carrie as well? Like, could Will be Carrie? You know, as well. Could that tie in as well? Oh, that. I mean, there is that growing up theme again, then, isn't there? Especially for season 3. Mm-hmm. And he does have that outburst and destroys Castle Byers. He does. Yeah. Will Byers is Carrie, confirmed. That would be interesting, though, that we presume is Elle. But actually, I'm just here for
any theories that show that Will has more meaning than the show is giving me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another influence for season 1. Let's
get back on topic.
It's Poltergeist.
21 minutes in, but we're good.
We're fine. Poltergeist, and also E.T. Those are 2 influences. I think E.T. is pretty obvious. Elle is the alien, which suggests is she from a different dimension?
This was something that was always in there, right from, I think it was right from the show Bible, that it was
literally,
Mike is Elliot. Yeah, that is his name, isn't it? Yeah,
Mike
is Elliot, Elle is E.T., so to speak, and how that's interacting there.
Can we also talk about how I was scarily old when I realised that E.T. stood for extraterrestrial, but
so E.T. is an influence.
I was like 16 and I like clocked and I was like, he's extraterrestrial. That's what it stands for.
But isn't the film E.T. the extraterrestrial?
No, isn't it just called E.T.?
Yeah. E.T. the extraterrestrial is the name of the film.
See, I just thought it was called E.T. I didn't buy it and watch it myself. I watched it at a friend's house. So I just thought it was called E.T. Also, that's a stupid name for a film.
It is.
You don't need to over-explain yourself. Just call it E.T. or the extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Stranger Things isn't called ST, the Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Very passionate about this, but that's sort of deflecting from the fact that I'm a bit of an idiot. Anyway, so that was from the get-go, like said in the show Bible, and I think they were told to watch E.T. They were told to watch E.T. and they were told to watch the Goonies.
And I think Stand By Me as well.
Yes. Yeah. So you can sort of see those things in E.T., but then it does suggest, is it part of the alternate dimension? Is that where Elle's from? Is that what's happened? Because he is from a different place that we don't know, like he's from space, but where,
Exactly. Is Elle then just going to disappear at the end of it again? There we go.
Possibly. Maybe she'll leave and they'll be like, it's time for me to go. But maybe this whole time she actually hasn't meant to belong on this planet, on this earth, on this dimension. And she realizes
I'm just imagining Elle at the end of season 5 just being like, I have to go now. My dimension needs me. And then that's just it. Like,
she just goes. She's gone. She's just like, I need to like hop back to.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not being funny, but like that, not that I'm thinking on that level, but like the concept that she's from somewhere that's a little bit like, that's not our planet. It's kind of how they first meet her, they just find her in the woods and she's come from this lab, which in itself is not an actual, like, she didn't grow up in a place that was what was normal, she didn't have a childhood that was normal because of what was happening to her.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things as well that's, I don't want to say it's normal to her, but that was her normal, wasn't it? Which is coming outside and being like, I don't know what a friend is, I don't know this.
She doesn't know what anything is outside of the lab. I mean, it holds the gate to a potential alternate dimension.
I mean, literally holds a gate.
Yeah, no, it does.
And
it could be that, and these powers, where have these powers come from? How do you develop telekinesis? And
because I suppose if you think about the fact if the mind flayer can drain them, then it does suggest that it comes from there. So, and if we want to talk about the potential of Will having powers stuff like that, let's be honest, he's got the true sight and the idea of sensing where the mind flayer is from the upside down as well. So there is something there. Anyway,
that's actually a really good point. Like, because the thing that I really love about the things, not that I really love it about MK Ultra. Obviously not. I do not like MK Ultra. But like the thing I like about the way MK Ultra is presented in the show, with the fact that Terry was involved, but it gave Terry powers, is does it do these powers, do they come from somewhere then? Like, because Elle was born with them, but Elle was only born with them because of the experiments that were done on Terry, and then again on Terry when Terry was pregnant. So do these powers come from somewhere? And the fact that it happened in the lab, so Terry goes into the lab and then these powers are drawn from something which is already there, this gate. And I know that Elle opens the gate, but she didn't create the gate.
No,
It's
we don't
there,
know what actually. Yeah,
no, we don't know why it's there, because we see in season 3, like, the Russians can create a similar gate, and there's always these flash forwards, and Brenna wants Elle to make contact with the Demogorgon, and there's this, I don't want to say like realm, but she goes in there, doesn't she? She's able to do that when she has the sensory deprivation and stuff. So she's pulling those powers from somewhere, and you think, if the mind flayer was injured, or it was able to take those away from her, is she actually going to get them back, or is it going to be harder for her to get them back because of the damage caused to the mind flayer and to the whole lab situation? Maybe they exist because she lived in Hawkins, and the further away from Hawkins she gets, the less those powers are going to be something she can take from.
That makes sense then for Will as well, then, because for example, in season 3, there's no reason why he should still be able to sense the mind flayer there. There's no reason. So that does kind of fit with that idea then, that it's simply Hawkins. Yeah, and there's something there, because for all we know, it was all taken out of him. Unless, kind of like in the Terry Ives scenario, then
there's a little bit left.
Yeah, there's either a little bit left, or there was something there to begin with. Because I mean, think of Callie. Why does Callie then have anything?
She still do it. That is true.
But then that opens a whole other thing, that are people with powers walking around, whether they know it or not.
Some of the numbers had powers before they came to the lab, but not everyone. And it's the not everyone that I'm interested in, because we see the story that people can be born with powers the whole time, and that's what makes them special and that kind of thing. But I find it more interesting the ones that have been able to acquire them.
I mean,
that's
what's, to be honest.
It is, and that's what's interesting. And like 9.5 can't really, but 9 could.
So what is actually going on?
Because they're identical twins. So that's interesting, and I think that obviously ties in a little bit with ET, but also, I guess, Poltergeist as well, coming from a different dimension, essentially. And static TV.
Of course, static TV, and also then season 3's he's here. They're literally they're here.
That's so creepy.
Taken from it.
Oh, that bit is so creepy. Oh, I forget about that when she does that little weird they're here. Oh, weird.
It's also very interesting that is the film that Joyce was taking him to see.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have.
Not someone that I think, are we to believe he was 10 or 11 at that point? Because it was definitely pre-season 1.
I find it wild. Like, this is a complete side note, that like American
this whole thing's been a side
note. That American R-rated movies, like NC-17 is a thing where a grown adult can take a child into a film which is meant for adults. That is a baffling concept. The oldest we have that in England is a 12A. So if you are under 12, you can go and see a 12A film with an adult. But like a 15 or an 18, you can't, like, an adult can't take you in. And I think that's better. No offense, America, but you have weird laws. I've always found it bizarre, but that's neither here nor there. But no, it is interesting that that's a line in Poltergeist, and then, like you said, Will uses that line 3 seasons down.
There you go. So, I mean, we've kind of mixed up the seasons anyway, but should we go on to season 2 and try and stick on season 2?
I mean, pretty big influence for season 2 was Exorcist.
I mean, I think it's a pretty big one, isn't it?
Mm,
Just a little bit.
possession. I remember watching it and being like, he's going to be possessed, isn't he? And they did it well, because I'm not a massive fan of demon voice possession type scenarios, because I think it gets to the point where it gets too dramatic.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, but I think they did it well in Stranger Things.
I think so. I think the moment when he's saying, let me go, and the voice is changing, that bit, every time it happens, it's done just enough that you don't think, oh, okay, it's overdone.
Yeah.
But when it changes and changes back, it's like that.
It's more psychological. Yeah. It's more like psychological rather than, I don't need to see someone like twist their limbs into ridiculous positions to understand that they've been possessed. I think the possession of Will is more like, I think we said this in the last podcast, it's more subtle and clever and thoughtful.
Yeah.
And that's scarier to me than twisting all my limbs and floating to the ceiling. Like, I'd be more scared. I'd be more unsettled with the way that Will was possessed than I would be the way that maybe like there's possession in, I don't know, I can't think of a film that's not The Exorcist where there's possession now, but you know what I mean.
Can I make a bold claim on that note then? And it isn't even a bold claim.
Go on then.
Okay. Will's possession in season 2 then was a lot better than Billy's possession in season 3. Going along those lines, because Billy's, even though it's not that twisted limbs thing, you still had the army melting into it, and you could, and I don't know if it was because we'd seen it in season 2 already, but you could predict it, and also Will could predict it. So he was telling us what was going to happen. So you know what I mean? That there wasn't that kind of real psychological moment going on.
The best part of Billy's possession, that was a weird sentence. The best part of Billy's possession is the bit where they're having dinner with Heather's parents, and he's talking and it seems normal, but he just doesn't seem quite right. So the fact that it's only Elle that can notice that him and Heather seem off, even Max, who is his sister, doesn't fully notice that he's not completely right. And that's the more unsettling thing, I think. After that, it's quite like gory, and that type of possession doesn't, like Mrs. Driscoll eating the fertilizer is not as scary to me. That's just gross. Whereas Bill is like thinking, and his more like creepy, like planning things out, that's more like methodical, same as the way that Will is possessed in season 2. That's creepier, because that's scary, because if that really happened, you wouldn't necessarily know.
No, the way that Billy says Elle in this is the same tone that Will says, that's my friend Mike. It's that same kind of thing. And I always think of the that's my friend Mike moment, because that's truly the who is this thing. Because it's just the turn, like eyes leading first to looking, and they're going, that's my friend Mike. And it's just,
that's creepy. Like, that's creepy. And like that, oh my god, like fair play to Noah Schnapp. Like, he did that so well. Like, that is genuinely that's the type of possession that I like to watch, because like you said, it's just enough creepiness that you know that something's off. Because like Owens wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong with that sentence.
No.
But Joyce knew. Joyce did know in that moment, and I think Mike did too, that the way he said that was off.
And I will say you do get a similar vibe, I think, in season 3 as well, when you have Billy giving, or the mind flayer, I guess, giving that speech to Elle, being like, we built all of this for you. Because it's kind of that tone where it's almost like, are you saying that you're on, or not on the same side,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah,
you
yeah.
bring her into it, for him to then turn around and be like, and we will destroy you and everyone else. That moment there with the music in that, and I know it gets gory and everyone starts melting from that moment, but that also gave the same effect.
Yeah,
Just
and the bit
little moments like that
where he's in the sauna or the steam room sauna, and he starts crying and he's like, I didn't mean to, but he's not actually, he doesn't actually feel like that. It's just a plot. You think like that's manipulation. That's like full.
Yeah,
that's scary. That's creepy.
Yeah.
And I think you can see
Mike
that with
noticing Will going like that at that moment, and then the look and him suddenly going, get away from the door.
from the door. But that ties in again to the poltergeist theme that we were talking about before. Like that's really similar to that, the we're here moment. And I remember the first time I watched that, that was like a shudder down your spine. And I guess like The Exorcist is similar because it's, the possession is so, I don't know, I think it does it quite well, and I like that.
And what is quite interesting about that is like a really minor detail with The Exorcist, the gown, I guess, that Will wears is the same gown that, I can't remember the name of the girl that is possessed. It's what she wears as well when she's being possessed. So it's like little callbacks. They didn't have to do that.
No, but this is the thing. This is
Yeah.
what we say about like. Also, can we? You said about them wearing the same gown. She is also 12 when she gets possessed.
Hey, there we go. Like a year or so difference, but
very similar when things start to happen.
Exactly.
But that's the way I like the way that the Duffers do it, because like you said, they didn't need to have the gown in, and if you didn't know that that's what it was, it's not obviously like there's not a label on the gown that says copyright The Exorcist. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not obvious, but if you know, you know, and if you don't, it doesn't impact your viewing of the show either way. And that's the way I like their ties in. Similarly to the way It is brought into season 2.
Yeah, so it is done in a very it is done in an interesting
it is
way.
done. The problem with that book and film always.
Yeah. So Mr. Baldo,
Bob's childhood
little
clown.
Yeah. That's so clearly a throwback to It.
Pennywise.
You know.
It's literally Pennywise.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
Bob's from Maine. And as we know, Stephen King doesn't think that any other state exists. So the fact that there's a throwback to Maine shows that that's Derry, throwback to Derry. And also the fact that Hawkins like Derry in the sense that it's not a real town.
No. Yeah, actually, that is true.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that the adults are very unaware, in a sense, or most of the adults are very unaware of what's going on, which we know is something that is very evident in It, that is something that affects the children.
Yeah.
And the adults just simply, it's something along those, not that they don't want, I can't remember what it is, it's they don't want to be aware, or they can't be aware.
They don't remember, but like the further you are away and you don't think about it, you don't remember. But like Mike chooses to stay in Derry, and so basically like the It book is actually originally set in the 60s when they're children, and then it's the 80s when they come back to Derry. But the films did it differently, and in my opinion they did it better, where they were children in the 80s and then it was modern when they came back. The films are really good. They actually cut out the worst parts of the books because there's some parts of that book which are just awful and didn't need to exist.
There is one that comes to mind immediately, which we won't be going into.
Stephen King, I think, really does need to have a think about the way that he tells some stories and things that he includes, because I don't understand how some of those scenes actually made it to print, to be honest. But they don't remember, and because they all moved away, it's like really hazy to them, and it takes Mike calling them back to Derry. I was going to say to Hawkins then, to Derry, and trying to like refresh their memories. And when he calls them, they're kind of like, oh my god. And Stanley actually like kills himself rather than going back, because he just knows that he can't. Even though he can't fully remember, he just knows that he can't do it again. And I think that says a lot about the mentality of it. So I wonder if that will tie in to what we were saying about Hawkins. Is it Hawkins? And unless you actively let yourself remember the way that Callie does, because she's hunting the people down, and the way that we know number 5 and 9.5 do, because they are trying to settle down but also be a little bit on the run because they don't want to get caught. So is it similarly where it's Hawkins that's the problem?
And
I
will it be
then
you could tie that in with then the buyers obviously getting out of there. Is it going to be a case of they're finally happy away from there, they're finally happy, but then they need to get back? And a lot of the influences for Steve, I'm not going to say they're going to go as far as Stanley did. I'm presuming
no,
they
won't.
No, on the screen. They wouldn't do that. But in a lot of these films that they influenced for season 4, a lot of them have that kind of more there's this kind of theme of not mental illness, but that kind of theme running through a lot of the films, that a lot of the characters and the influences of depression. A lot of the characters in the film are depressed or have high levels of anxiety, and they're dealing with that side of it. So is it going to be a case of it's brought up through that element of it?
Richie is very like on edge the whole time and has like stage fright, and like, well, he's fine, he's a comedian, and then he gets the call from Mike and then literally like goes to do a show and just like can't do it and just throws up. Like Bev is in like an awful marriage. Like they've all like Eddie has married essentially the woman, like, so Bev essentially marries a man who's really similar to her dad and treats her the way her dad treated her. Eddie marries essentially a woman that's like his mum and is as controlling as his mum was, and they did it really well in the films because they casted the same woman.
Oh, that is clever.
Which was done quite well. So they're not doing great. And it's actually Mike that is the one that sort of is thinking things through a bit more clearly, because he's been in it the whole time.
I mean, if we want to relate that to Strange Things, then if they want to, that could be Mike's storyline then, literally. Because I mean, he has lived through it, and I'm guessing at some point he is going to need Elle and Will back, so he will be the one to make the call, I would presume. So
this ties in Will Hopper remember.
There's a lot of things with Hopper, I think, that we have spoken about on here before, that would be interesting to figure out. One, if he remembers who he is. Two, I'm presuming he's going to want to come back, but would he actually want to? Because there is so much that has affected him within Hawkins that it is, essentially he died, I guess, from the eyes of the public in there, that he got kidnapped because he was there, that there's so much going on there that it is, would you want to go back?
I know that I always compare him to Bucky, but the comparison is legit. And I do wonder if, like, there's at the end of the Winter Soldier, like Bucky he has like a vague recollection that like Steve was someone he knew, and the name Bucky rings a bell in his head, but he like beats the absolute crap out of Steve, and then they land in the ocean, but then instead of letting Steve drown, he drags him out and leaves him on the beach, but then he walks away. So he can beat him up, but then the concept of this man dying is weird. So, and like feels wrong to him, so he drags him out and leaves him. And I wonder if that's what it's going to feel like for Hopper, that he's not going to remember who he is and he's forced to work and do the jobs of what they want him to do. But he'll have like a weird recollection of the time.
I mean, that could definitely work. I think, yeah.
There's a lot of Marvel references and there's a lot of Marvel inspirations and influences for season 4. A lot of Marvel for season 4. And I'm very happy about it.
Wow. There you go.
Another really obvious one for season 2 is Ghostbusters.
Where on earth does that come into it? Because I have no idea.
Such a subtle influence that I don't understand why they even mentioned it.
What I actually really enjoy that this isn't so much why is an influence, but outside of this, that Finn Wolfhard dresses as a Ghostbuster in season 2 and then gets cast in Ghostbusters. The new one coming out. And I think wasn't there something around it as well that they were almost a bit reluctant to cast him because of that, but actually his audition was pretty solid.
That's cool.
And they thought, let's put him in there. There was something along those lines, but I do appreciate that. But yeah, Ghostbusters.
It's not really a subtle influence, is it? It's not really something to read between the lines of. We understand the Ghostbusters. One of my favorite episodes, so good. And I just think, again though, Dustin catches something in his little ghost catcher, and as is not the technical term for it, but my mind has gone blank. And again, something from a different dimension, and I guess you could say that ghosts are from a spiritual dimension. They don't
something strange in the neighborhood.
Who are you gonna call? But no, stop. No, we're not going there. But yeah, I think that is pretty thing. But then I think those influences do go over into season 3 as well. Like a lot of those influences we see, like we said about Jurassic Park. There's a lot more.
It's a lot more body horror, I believe they were saying in season 3.
Yeah.
So was it The Thing? Is that the one I'm thinking of? When
yeah,
and
Back to the Future.
Yeah, which is interesting because actually, at the same time, I don't think there was very many Back to the Future things in season 3.
No, but I wonder if it was subtle and it is the time travel thing or the dimension thing.
Yeah, it could be something like, because obviously they do watch it. So I don't know, maybe it'll be a thing it carries on into season 4. Is Back to the Future a influence for season 4?
I think so.
Yeah. I wonder if it's going to come across more then, because I think we can say this because obviously a lot of extras casting goes up and anyone can see them. I'm not
because anyone can apply to be an extra on anything. So yeah,
and there is a lot of mention for, say, I think it's 1950s, 1960s kind of looking people, however you'd say that. So I do wonder then if you're going to have your Back to the Future moment in season 4.
Maybe we'll see Joyce and
I think that is what a lot of people are thinking it's going to be. Especially when we're told we're going to have Hopper backstory. I think that's what people are thinking we're going to get.
Oh my god, that would be a true blessing on this planet. Speaking of season 4, should we go over the season 4 influences? So
yes, there's some interesting ones.
Lee and I spent 2.5 hours, I would say, going over. Yeah. So basically, the Stranger Writers on Twitter did the Video Store Fridays.
Yeah, Video Store Fridays,
and spoke about all the influences, and then they made a giant board of all the influences. So me and Emily copied that board but wrote down what we think those influences mean. So we spent a lot of time doing that. So yeah. That's what we do. That's what we do.
Obviously, Marvel is a big one, which we've kind of gone into, and I think we've said various times how we think Marvel could come into this.
Yeah, just do want to add, because this isn't horror, but our alternate dimension thing and time travel thing, Into the Spider-Verse is a influence, and also Age of Ultron is an influence, which I was watching last night as we planned this, and that is like the creation of something like that you can hardly control, or the idea that there's something coming from a different dimension that they're trying to protect themselves from, which is literally Tony's reasoning for why he tries to create Ultron in the first place. So I mean, pretty big, isn't it? There's also the Hellfire Club, which is X-Men, but we're going to do a whole episode on the Hellfire Club because that's a really big one to talk about. So we won't go into it in this one, but we will just say that the Hellfire Club is an influence and has been an influence since the start, really.
Since season 1, I mean, it's literally the comic that Will and Dustin make a bet on if he beats him home. But so a lot of the films in season 4, they kind of vary from either Marvel multiverse kind of aspects to things like High School Musical and the Goofy movie. But then you get the odd ones. You get Black Swan, which to me is very interesting because it's more that psychological horror roots and kind of almost split personality.
Yeah,
I guess it's
I wonder Hopper.
Yeah, exactly, and that they want that. Obviously, Black Swan. I'm sure most people have seen it. That she's almost trying so hard to be this perfect thing. She really wants to be the Black Swan in the ballet, and by doing that, there's this real internal battle within herself. And I think at the end, she ends up stabbing herself, which leads to this really dramatic moment at the end of it where she finally performs as a Black Swan, and then it's just she's put so much into that where I think she dies after finally reaching it, and there's a lot of that, I think, as I said earlier, within season 4 and the influences. So there is that more psychological element with a lot of things, and it does bring up exactly the Shining. It's that more mental illness kind of aspect coming into it. So I'm really intrigued if they're going to go down the more psychological horror route with this one, which I think they kind of, I don't want to say they tapped in with season 2 a bit, but
they did though. They did.
Yeah.
No, they did, and I like that.
Yeah.
No, I like that type of horror. It's like you said, season 3. You said earlier it was quite gory. So I quite like the concept of it being more psychological. But with The Shining, it is like no work, all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. Is that going to be Hopper? Like,
I can't see it being anyone but Hopper, to be honest.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, The Shining is creepy because of the psychological elements to it. I remember the first time I saw it, when I noticed that Red Rum was murder backwards, I was like, oh God. Like, but I watched The Shining very young. But like, it's creepy elements. Like, the hotel is not right, you know, like you're going down the corridor and there's 2 creepy little twins, and then you go down the corridor and there's like a sea of blood coming out of the lift. Like, that's creepy, you know. It's full of ghosts, and it's kind of, are those ghosts physical ghosts that are actually there, or are they mental ghosts that they're dealing with?
So I do wonder if that's going to be, is Elle almost suffering from like PTSD of thinking, not PTSD, that's the wrong one. Well, no, it could be PTSD.
It could be PTSD. She absolutely would, like, could be valid dealing with that.
Yeah. So is it kind of a case of that Elle is dealing with PTSD, rightfully so, with everything that has happened to her over time? Or is she, we mentioned this like in conversation the other day, that is she blaming herself for what's happened to Hopper? So is that why she's almost seeing the ghosts of him? Or is it kind of a case then that these her powers trying to come through, and she's kind of tapping into the void and seeing him, but she's thinking that it's ghosts?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. It really could be. And like, I think there is such a mental like a physical, not mental, there is such a psychological aspect to this, to the influences. Like even the ring is one of them, and whilst that is again ghosts and like the idea that she can kind of get, Samara can come and get you through the screen, and you know it's a bit creepy, it's more that she doesn't actually kill you, does she? Samara scares you so much that you get scared to death. Isn't that right?
That's it.
I'm sure that's because I have seen the ring. I've seen the Japanese version as well, but obviously she's never, it never states how she kills, but it's more that their faces look so scared that they literally have been like scared to death. And that's really interesting that that's a choice. We were saying when we were planning this as well that it's like a mother who didn't like what her child could do, so she tries to get rid of her child. And then also like, is the well which is in the ring symbolic of an alternate dimension, or like the gate, or something like that? You know, you can see those parallels there, and you wonder, is that something coming through? So there's definitely a psychological element to season 4. Absolutely, so much of these influences are so psychological.
There's a lot of references in all of the films to psychiatric hospitals and that kind of thing as well. So I do wonder then if that's something we're gonna see in some element of ordinary season 4 in some way.
Ordinary people in a psychiatric hospital. They also reference Nightmare on Elm Street, but specifically Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which is, was it Dream Warriors? Is that what it's called?
Yes, Dream Warriors.
Dream Warriors, Dream Warriors. You can
okay. Within that, it's one of the characters, she essentially dreams of Freddy Krueger coming to get her, and Freddy makes her hurt herself, which leads to her then being put on a psychiatric hospital, and a character called Nancy is someone that she meets.
Interesting. The thing that is but the thing that I like about the psychological ones is like it is such a play on the way that you look at it, because like for so many of them, like The Shining for example, it's like, are they really there? The ghosts that Jack sees, are they really there, or has this happened and it's in his head, you know? Whereas like when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, we know the backstory of Nightmare on Elm Street is that Freddy Krueger actually is there and he is tormenting them because he's tormenting so many people. But you can also understand the viewpoint of like the character's parents and the psychiatric, like people in the hospital, because they're not going to believe that someone is in your dreams telling you to do things and trying to kill you. So that's why psychological ones are so interesting, because it's not just this gory, let's just hurt everyone, and there's an obvious reason for that, you know, like there's so many different layers and so many different dimensions to psychological horror. And I think that's why season 2 is my favorite season of Stranger Things, and I think that's why I'm so excited for season 4, because so many of the influences seem psychological, and you don't go through that without having psychological impact. You just don't do that.
No, that I was going to say the same thing, that I think that's why, and when we were kind of talking about Will's possession versus Billy's possession, I think that's why for me, aside from other things, Will's possession worked better, because it was almost unpredictable, and you had that whole element of people didn't believe him, and the people thought it was all in his head, and it was purely PTSD. Yeah, and that was probably going on at the same time. We know that. Whereas in season 3, the mind flayer kind of had that more like last ditch attempt, and it decided, right, psychological isn't going to work, so let's just destroy them. And even though we had those few moments, it was, I don't want to say it was predictable, but let's just say you went into season 3 thinking, okay, Billy's going to get possessed and he's going to die. Whereas in season 2, you went into it kind of having an idea that some of it was going to go on with Will, but you didn't quite know where it was going to end for him.
You can kill a physical monster, you can't kill ghosts. And you can't kill you can't kill Freddy Krueger. You can't. He's already dead. You know how do you do that? You know, like, how do you, in The Shining, you can't remove those ghosts.
No.
You know, like, it's so much harder to deal with psychological horror than it is to deal with physical things. You know, a monster comes at you, you know, like a zombie comes at you. We've seen so many zombie films. We know how to kill a zombie. You know, if there was a zombie apocalypse, I'd know how to kill the zombies. You know, we get it. You know, Shaun of the Dead taught us how to do that. But, like, how do you go about stopping a ghost? How do you go about stopping something which is so much bigger than you are? That's why it's creepier. That's why it's scarier. And that's why it has more of an impact, because you can't stop it. And that's what makes it creepy.
Yeah. Question of the week.
On that note, can I also just say that one influence is Twister, and I find that really interesting because I want to know why. I don't have any theories for why. I just want to know why that film, because that film messed me up when I watched it when I was like 9.
I mean, not horror, but I am really interested in how on earth a Goofy movie is going to come into it.
And High School Musical, they're literally going to move to Utah. We know this.
A Goofy movie, like, to really go really simple on the plot of it. You've got Goofy's son lies to essentially his want-to-be girlfriend and goes performs on stage with his favourite pop idol of the time. Like, I don't know. Like,
Mr. and Mrs. Smith is also an influence. Again, not horror, but Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a horror. Couple of vampire movies, Lost Boys and Dracula. That's like undead. Like Hopper. I guess Hopper's technically not dead, but I think he is. Anyway, like you said,
Billy's going to come back, isn't he?
Do not speak that into the void, because we're not allowing it.
Question of the week. Let's move on from it.
Question of the week. No more Billy. Question of the week.
We're going to talk really general for this one. Knowing, what do you think is going to happen in season 4 then? Thinking about the horror influences behind it, and I guess with the other films behind it as well, how do you think this is going to play out? Because I think from talking through this, we've got I think we've got our kind of our ideas in our mind that we think it's going to go psychological, but we could be completely wrong. It could
my god,
yeah, it could be back to being that kind of gory, or maybe I don't know, Mike's going to become a vampire.
Maybe it's a musical season. Maybe we're looking at it all wrong. We're trying to think it's dark, but it's actually a musical season, and Elle goes to East High. Elle and Will go to East High and start performing. Who knows?
I would tap out.
I don't know, I'd quite like to see them singing. Maybe we can have a repeat of Susie and Dustin. But anyway, on that note, thank you for listening to episode 13 of the Hawkins Do You Copy podcast.
Episode 14.
Episode 14! Oh my god, it's 10 p.m. We're tired.
So remember, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and tuned in at Hawkins Do You Copy, as well as catch us on our social medias. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, which is at Hawkins Podcast, as well as our YouTube, which is Hawkins Do You Copy.
Thank you for tuning in for episode 14 of the Hawkins Do You Copy podcast. We will talk to you next week. Over and out.